I appreciate the chance to talk to you. I've been teaching here at the university now for 35 years plus, and over that time you get asked from time to teach the intro course. And that's always just a joyous event when you're asked to do that. I started doing that some years ago, and they also wanted me to increase the number of students in the course. It was called Weather and Climate. We had 40 students. So I changed the name to Extreme Weather, and now I have 200 students in the class. And when you have that many students, you begin to appreciate how little you know about your students. So my whole goal in this process was to think about how could I interact, make a class. We're going to have these large courses because they pay for the more designer courses the students will take later on. So if we're going to have these large courses, how can we raise the bar and make them better, make them more interactive, make them more active learning environment? So years ago, like 10 years ago, I started creating tools which allow me to do what you could do with clickers, but I could ask more kinds of questions. Instead of just ABC, I wanted to ask image-based questions. So I created something which let me, I'm a meteorologist for God's sake, I wanted to ask questions about weather maps. So where on the map do you expect wind speeds to be high? And the students put a dot in the map, and they thought that was cool. But then the students came and said, look, we're going to lug our laptops to class. What if we could do A, B, C, and D, these other things? And so actually, at that point, I simply started listening for a change to my students and writing down what the ideas they had. Like they wanted to take notes. They wanted to ask me questions. They wanted to be able to do a lot of different things with their technology that I hadn't thought of. So I just started adding this to the software. And today, I get the opportunity to show you, give you a first peek of the next generation of this tool. It's been used now for several years across campus, and it was sold to Echo 360 a couple of years ago, and is now in, I can't remember the numbers, over 300 universities and colleges, used by over 2 million students. So this one exercise in how I wanted to improve this one class here at Michigan has gone berserk. And you all have the opportunity today to play along. If you'd signed up early, I sent out emails to you. If you have a device on your person, you may log in at this point and play along at home, because I'll be asking you some questions along the way, just as I would with students in class. And please understand the system I'm showing you is very much in beta. I'm using it in my class this semester, but I'm the only one using it. But I want to give you the opportunity to see what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because when you have access to all these students and now you are able to measure everything they're doing, what do you do with that? How is that helpful? It's a lot of data, and I want to work with you today and think about the day is coming where you're going to probably know everything your students are doing inside and outside of the class. Is that good or bad? And what do you do with it? And that's the challenge that we face here in this exercise. So I am, again, a meteorologist, and I've been for my whole life been collecting data. We collect data in meteorology. We assimilate it into a form that we can use it on a global scale. We build models for forecasting the weather, and we make forecasts. And we're doing well at that, aren't we? So let's replicate that for the classroom and see if you can forecast now not only the weather for the weekend, but what your students are doing. And on top of that, at the bottom here, we have to think about scalability. Because yes, I can go out and build a tool for my class, but then I want to hand it to Mike, and he wants to perhaps use it in his class, or Steve wants to use it in his class, and on we go. You have to quickly think about how do you scale this thing and make it so it's sustainable. But you probably also know I created a site called the Weather Underground, which we also started for my class, so I get weather information in the morning. And it grew to have 17 million users a day. So again, you have to think about scalability from the get-go and how we make this thing work on a grand scale. In weather forecasting, there are kind of 4 models of weather forecasts. One is a persistence method. That is basically what happened today is going to happen tomorrow. And that model works pretty well under the right weather conditions. The analog method is, oh, this student looks like a student or this weather situation looks like a situation we had last year, so I'm going to forecast based on that. And you can collect data and build statistical models based on what's happening today on the grids around the world. I can, from statistics, guess what's going to happen next. And this model is particularly good for severe weather events, which don't get handled so well by the fourth category, which is numerical modeling. Now, in the world of students in the classroom, we aren't gifted with the numerical modeling. And, you know, so here we collect all the data from around the globe at various levels in the atmosphere, assimilate all that, put it into our models, and from that can make a forecast. Try that with that object, you know. You can collect a lot of information about this student and what they're doing, but to build the model is a demanding and challenging thing. And we don't have the numerical models. We don't have, to my knowledge, numerical relationships between, you know, the student pages and thinking and all the aspects we can measure. So we're limited here to the analog model and the statistical models. And things like Tim are doing are looking at these models and thinking about, in the analog sense, so, well, this student kind of smells like a student I had 2 years ago who did this, this, and that, and therefore I ought to give them feedback which is relevant to what that student would have gotten. And that's one of the beautiful models that we can come up with for how to respond and help the students with these data. So here's Perry's numerical model for the classroom. And it's a little fuzzy here, but I'm saying outcomes, outcomes being grades, learning, however you want to measure the wealth of a student if the class is going on. It's going to be a function of, my thinking is 4 parts. One of them is the background. They walk into your class. Tim has shown, you know, with the GPA is a great predictor of what they might do in the classroom. There are things about their background which are going to influence how they do in the class. Second is motivation. You know, I ask my students every year in a survey, how motivated are you, how interested are you in the topic of extreme weather? And believe it or not, there are students who aren't really interested in extreme weather. Go figure. Check their pulse, I don't know. But there are students who come to your class who aren't necessarily motivated by the topic you're teaching. And that's got to influence their capacity, in my mind, to think and learn in the classroom. The degree to which they actually participate in class is part of my model. And then life also sticks its head in here. Things happen, you know, they broke up with their loved one, or some relative is having a hard time. These things happen, and I think probably also affect their capacity to learn in a course. How do we calculate then each of these parts? How do we come up with functions here that we could use? And are those functions global, or are they specific per course? And that's sort of the challenge we're facing here. But for the first time, here's the exciting part. For the first time, tools like I'm showing you today are collecting everything the students are doing. So we have the hope of starting to build some of these functions and see to what degree they are, in fact, global. The world of student learning, as we have in these large courses especially, are designed something like this. You have this I'll call lecture environment, and in that lecture environment you're seeing slides and animations, and there's discussion going on in the classroom, and you may have a student response system, whether it's clickers or LectureTools or whatever here. And then outside of class, you may have homework, labs going on, discussion outside, and you might have other resources that you've assigned to the students. Now, what is central to all that is that students are taking notes. And they're taking notes in class, and they're taking notes potentially outside of class which are related to the other things that they're doing. And here's the part I want to show you today is we're able now to mine the notes the students are taking in real time. I'm going to creep you out here in a minute, because I am doing this in classes in real time. So we see what students are typing. The question becomes, all right, what do we do with that information? If I know what the students are typing, I can boil it down to on per slide basis. How might I take that information and point them to other resources as they're typing in class? How might I use that information to guide the feedback that I'd want to give to that student for that day or that week? These are the challenges, and then the whole thing is being potentially captured on lecture and all that becomes part of this learning environment for the students. So my interest is, how do you put all this into one system, collect the data, make it available to both the instructor and to the university as a whole, so that you can have researchers come into this sandbox and start playing with the data and looking for the models, the statistical approaches that might help explain learning in the classroom. Any questions so far? Yes?
Well, how do you handle this kind of interaction? I'm asking you a question. Is it my responsibility then to go type in my question to you after the fact, or do you have to? I mean, it seems kind of overwhelming.
I don't add that. That's a good point. But in my classes, everything's being captured, so one could go back and add that information as well. It's going to be harder to add that, isn't it? Because how do I know that you are the one who asked the question, and how do I quantify what it is you just said? There are challenges for sure in this model. But apart from that, everything they're doing digitally is being collected.
Perry, will you at some point say something about why you think this should be one toolkit and not a bunch of interacting parts?
Yes, I'm going to withdraw what I just said. This should be a series of interacting tool parts. I don't care. The main thing that these tools, this is a third-party tool. They should be able to talk to each other, for God's sake. And if they can't talk to each other, don't buy it. They should be able to talk to each other. They should have APIs which say, the data coming from LectureTools should talk to the data coming from Bluestream, whatever it is here, and all the other sources you might have, and whatever LMS we might have in the future. Here. You who have your technology open now see that you are able to see the slides I'm presenting, hopefully. And on those slides that I am presenting, I'll just point out some things that you can do as students. One of them is that you can take notes over here on the right side. And those notes are being stored in a way that they're all time-stamped. So when you start typing a note, we keep track of when you start typing the note. And all this will be stored in your account. You're going to be able to open this account tomorrow, the next day, or whenever, and see the notes that you've taken here today. You can also, you can also yourself pose questions, a little conversation thing up there. In my large class, I found, for example, that students are uncomfortable asking questions verbally sometimes. What I found is that the male students, half are comfortable and half are not comfortable asking questions verbally. For female students, it's only about a third who are comfortable asking questions verbally, and at least in the science course. So what I wanted to do is level the playing field, and with that button now, everybody can ask a question digitally whenever you want to, and those questions are streaming up to my computer here in the front of the room, and at any point, I can go look at the questions and answer them. Because I'm blessed with a teaching assistant, it's usually his or her job, though, to answer those questions in real time. And then everybody gets to see the questions and answers, but you don't see who asked the question. And the students wanted that, and it wound up being genius. Because what happens is that now, where before, you all know this, you ask the question, any questions? And you always get that response, right? Nobody says a thing. But 2/3 of my students are asking questions now. 2/3. And it's sobering after all these 35 years or so to understand how confusing I probably was my whole life. And until this moment, I didn't know that. Because now they can pose the question. And females are asking questions at a higher rate per capita than male students. Students for whom English is not the first language are asking questions at the same rate as other students. So in my mind, this is already a victory. I've opened the class up at level of the playing field, and everybody can participate. I see some hands there.
I was just curious about that 2/3. That's 2/3 ask a question in every lecture?
No, no. Over the course of the semester, 2/3 asked a question, which is way higher than it's ever been in my lifetime. Jared, did you have a question?
Well, just more of a comment to that. I think people's willingness to offer questions is going to be directly related to whether they think you're able and whether you do respond to those questions. So it's probably a pretty important thing to try and handle the questions in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. No, either I have to answer them after class, or my teaching assistant answers them during class, which works even better. Also, you can bookmark slides. Say, what he's saying right now is important. I bookmarked that slide. You can come back later and search slides by which ones you have bookmarked. The flag down here means I am confused. We call it the WTF button. I don't know what he's talking about. I hit that button, and it marks the slide as a place you were confused, and also then sends a signal to me in the front of the room, so I have a meter up here showing you how many of you are confused at any point. Is that cool or what? We're communicating. The whole point is even a large class, I'm making it so that we are communicating. And I tell you that if you give the students the opportunity to participate, they will. We just don't often give them that opportunity in these large classes. So, and at the same time, everything you're doing is being collected and data is being stored, so we can see does it make a hill of beans whether you ask a question or not in class. I can pose questions to them far more than what you can do with a clicker. I mean, here's image-based questions, for example. Students can answer questions, and if I click a button, I can require that they justify their answer. Class, it's a non-football Saturday. Where's the hottest spot in the big house? Ye, with technology in front of you, can answer the question. And you answer in two ways. One is you put a dot on the map of the spot you think is the hottest spot in the stadium, and then tell me why. If things work here for me today. All right, I see some of you are voting. Somebody has picked the middle of the stadium. Somebody is flying above the stadium. and everybody has, and here's the beauty of this thing is I can go and see what your justification is. You click on the dot and the justification pops up. This is huge fun, because now you can see what they were thinking as well as where they voted, and have a conversation with the class about why that was a stupid answer. I know who said that, but you don't know who said that. And it engenders a great more conversation in class than I've ever had before by being able to ask questions like this and get their feedback. And you can indicate when you create the question also what's the correct answer and give credit for those who picked the right answer. Yes?
When you say you know who gave that answer, do you know in real time or do you know later?
I know in real time. I mean, I can go turn on answer. It was a version here I can turn on the names. It's very unpopular when I do that. So there's a way for me to look at the names, but I don't show that to the class. Yeah. And the answer, by the way, is the M in the middle of the field. We did a big, Brenda, we did actually took students out there one year. Thousands of students went out there with these instruments to measure temperature, had them run around the stadium, and lo and behold, it was the M. I don't know what that M is made out of, but it absorbs radiation at a high rate. Any questions so far here? Now here's the data that the system is collecting, and it's collecting, are they confused, the questions that they ask, the answers they give to my questions, all the notes that they're typing, and please, I don't look at their notes. That would be creepy. But what I do is I mine them in real time in the aggregate to think about what are the words they're all typing, and make word clouds then, or what are the words that are being typed most often in this lecture.
So you might have already said this earlier on. So going back to the last slide, what if students don't have a device with them in class?
Correct. Good question. Yeah. These questions, any device, this will work on any device, first of all. And if they either don't have a device or choose not to bring a device, they simply have to hand their answers in on paper, much like we used to do. I can still do that. I'm old enough. So I don't want to dissuade them. I don't want to force them to use technology, but I will tell you this, is I show them on day one, this is what it does. And my class, 92% show up voluntarily with technology every day because they see value in it. Their notes are stored, they can participate, and it's just easier for them. So all this data is being collected, and that's just one part, thanks to Rachel's Learning Fellows program. I discovered last semester that all this data there's a bigger set of data out there on campus. And here's what the sort of LectureTools is collecting over here, but at the same time, we have data that's available from the LMS. Steve Lon is doing work with that. There's a whole student information system called the data warehouse that has information about your students. And what I do is I pull it all together into one database, anonymize it, so that we don't actually know which student is which now. But we can now do research on how students are learning. And I would like to see the university adopt a program like this so the data is available to researchers in a place that's anonymized here and is collecting information from these sources and all the third-party stuff, to go to your question, into one spot so that we could, as a group, do research. What's going on? What are the common trends that we see among these data sets?
Do you find that students are reluctant to take notes here, given that you can read them?
No, absolutely not.
They don't?
No. It's going to get worse in a second, so hold that thought. I'm really a creepy guy. Things I'm collecting. So we collect data. There's data. Lots of data. All right. What aspects of student participation? One equation I made for student learning is somehow going to be related to participation. What aspects of participation affect student outcomes? Again, ye with technology. This is the kind of question I'd ask in class. And here are our list of 5-ish, 6-ish things. This is the kind of question where I'm saying, what's the most, the least important? You just grab one of these and drag it to the top and take one and drag it down to the bottom. You can rearrange the list in your own device. And when you're done, submit the answer, and then I get data back on what you've all been voting. And this allows, again, often these don't have correct answers. You can make a correct answer here, but often they don't have a correct answer. This is more for debate. And this sort of event does engender a lot of debate in class. Let's see what, and you can show results like this, which show how many people voted this one number 1, how many voted this one number 2, etc. And we're still trying to think through whether this is the best way to show this or not. But you get some feedback. So many people think the number of questions answered correctly is the highest. Second place is number of slides with notes attached, number of questions answered. You see how this works. Again, I want you to think about what you think is important here, because I'll show you now results. and I apologize for the graphs. This is I uploaded these and they didn't come out as well as I'd hoped. But there are a number of lessons I've learned from data the past semester. First is to do with motivation. And here's where I asked their level of interest from low interest in extreme weather to truly excited students. And you can see that there is, in fact, a trend, that the students who are less excited about the topic do a little bit less, so the average might be like 75 or so. The students who are mostly very excited have averages maybe around 82. So there is some information there that students are motivated by their interests. That makes sense. Is that a predictive tool or not? I'm not sure. I can measure how many students are physically in class. I didn't tell you this, but my class, the students are, I have a class of 200. My room holds 100. So my class is broadcast live on the internet, and the students are allowed to sit wherever to participate in class. And they'll watch the live broadcast where they are, but they're going to use the tool to actively participate. Answer questions, ask questions, do all the things you do in the classroom. And so I'm able to track also who's physically in the room, who's not in the room. And you can see on a day-by-day basis last semester here that the number of students who are physically in the room in black, number of students who are watching from away in gray. This is in their school residence. The light gray is from elsewhere. And the white area up here is students who just did not participate that day. So you can see that it gives them the flexibility, and remember last winter was ugly. This gave them the flexibility to watch class in their jammies and home in bed if they wanted to.
How can you tell?
I asked them. First question I asked them in class days, where are you? And they answer honestly. They have nothing to lose. You could do the IP numbers, but that's ugly and messy. So, and this shows that second lesson learned is, and this is, I believe, my course, simply how many questions of those I posed during class did you answer? A measure of participation. And this is each of the 3 hourly exams I give. This is how much did you participate, how many questions did you answer between the beginning of the first exam, first and second exam, second and third exam. And there seems to be a trend there that simply, if you answered 20 to 40% of the questions, on average you did worse than if you answered most of the questions in class, which is kind of intuitive sense. But it's intuitive sense, but it gives you a measure in week 2 of the class of who's in trouble, who's likely to be in trouble. Measures I've never had before about what's going on in my classroom. Oh, and by the way, Melissa Gross's class, she allowed me to look at her data as well. And this is in her class. Also, this is a fraction of questions answered. And again, there's somewhat of a trend there. Maybe not as strong. We might want to know why. There's a difference in between the two courses. But we can measure this kind of thing. Are you answering?
Have you done anything with that information in the sense that if you can identify by the second week of class or the fifth week of class, who's going to...
Hold that thought. Yes, I'm coming to that. Yes. The question is, what do we do with this information? Yes, that's exactly the point. Outcomes in my class are very much related to whether they get the questions right during class. Like, duh. If you get the question right during class, you're probably going to get it right on the exam, right? Duh. And this shows that quite clearly. So again, now I've got to measure which students I should be watching for because they're getting the questions wrong during class. Those, we have measures we've not had before, easily accessible to look. And this is for my class, 3 exams I gave. Whoops, there was a similar graph for Melissa's course here as well. It makes good sense then that you watch how many questions you're getting right and wrong in the course of the semester, and you can identify the students at risk. Now, I did this at Michigan. All the students are, bright, and all the students are above average. But this tool is being used in many other schools. At Wayne State, other schools that end in the word state. It's using other schools where the students aren't quite as bright. So in those schools, it's possible that this gives you a way to identify these students early and maybe retain them if they might drop out. A place like Wayne State, there's a small fraction of the students who actually graduate in 6 years. How can we identify them early and give them the help they need? Tools like this offer that potential. This is going now to the issue of those notes that are being taken by students. And this shows how many students last semester on a day-by-day basis took notes. That's the sort of dark gray area. And how many notes per student taking notes were taken. That would be the light gray area. So some days, like moisture, I must have been quite verbose or confusing or something because the students took far more notes per capita than the other days. Again, when general circulation came about, there's a lot of notes that day. Here's a guest speaker. But you see the data. You get access to data you've not had before about what's happening in your class. In fact, you can break it down. We can break it down on a slide-by-slide basis. Did anybody take notes on this slide? And if you get the feedback that you showed 30 slides and the students didn't take any notes on 5 of them, maybe you should look at those 5 slides. Maybe those slides are just worthless. But again, you have data like that available to you.
So it looks like there's about half the students that are taking notes. Does that vary from day to day, which half it is?
That's right. This is last semester. In last semester, I think I had 120 students in the class. So, we had some days near 100 here, so it varies, Some students don't take notes. Now, good question. Is that important? To what degree is that important? So here, what we found was that the volume of words they type in class is not related to their grades. Because I had some students who just type a few words as bullets, basically, to remind themselves of content. Others seem to be transcribing more than verbatim what I'm saying. In fact, I had one student last semester who typed 50,000 words. I did not speak 50,000 words, so I have no idea what that student was typing. But we did find that there seemed to be a relationship with the number of slides for which notes were attached. and which meant they're participating. They're, you're pinging them. And the big worry many of my colleagues, you guys have, is that if you do this in a class, the students are going to go look at Facebook or do email, right? Well, you find to sit in the back of a LectureTools class, and often, yeah, they might do that for a moment, but you're going to draw them back in. They're going to take a note. They're going to have to answer a question. They're going to ask a question. You're giving them the tools to participate. And the students will participate if you give them the chance. Yes?
Can they handwrite any of the notes? Do you have any method for someone to write with a stylus or something, or with their finger?
The students can actually, you can't do it yet because it's coming out in the next version, but you can draw on the screen. So any slide that you've got on your screen there, you can draw on. You'll be able to draw on. Now, whether that's good enough for the notes, I'm not sure. But clearly the day is coming with the iPad 7 that you're going to be able to just write your stuff. There's no reason why this can't accommodate that. And here's the same thing, number of slides containing notes in Melissa's class. And, again, it kind of varies from exam to exam, but you can see that maybe squint at it long enough, there seems to be a bit of a trend there.
Yes, sir. Is there any way to track whether or not students are using other web resources like Wikipedia, Google searches to help annotate their notes?
Only if it was a link from this system, because otherwise I can't access the data, I don't think. Any computer scientists in the room might help stop me here, but I don't know how to know that otherwise.
Do you think they are doing that? When you say something and they're totally confused, do they go?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Last week, it's embarrassing because I was doing this big thing about how climate change is based on orbits changing and everything. And the orbit of the Earth changes over periods of 100,000 years and 400,000 years. And some student goes, why? Because I've been saying it for 35 years. But suddenly, at that moment, could not think about what the right answer was. And before I could get anything out of my mouth, he says, oh, in Wikipedia it says it's because of the orbits of Saturn and Jupiter. And I just stood there and looked stupid for a while. But great, they're participating. And yeah.
Perry, these weak relationships between number of slides containing notes or length of notes compared to the relatively strong relationship between number of questions answered and number of questions answered correct, kind of just replicates a learning sciences finding that taking notes is not a very effective way to learn, but being tested is.
Well, I don't actually read that literature, but replicate it. Excellent, good. Good. Well, that helps.
So asking questions, making people think about something and provide an answer is just a very powerful.
And what we're trying to do here is fill in that function. What things are we measuring, and how can we use that as what weight should we give to each of them? And that's sort of the goal in this whole process. And so that's sort of wellness. This is the part you start getting creepy. Because every day in class, every day I ask the students, how do you feel? Thinking about that life part of the equation. How do you feel? And for those of you who are here today, you can tell me as well. It's a graph that looks like this. And on the graph, it's emotionally from poor to great, and physically from poor to great. And you can put a dot. Today I'm feeling emotionally superior, and physically I'm in the dumps down here. So you put a dot somewhere on the map, and my 200 students do this daily. And I'm able to mine those data over the course of the semester, see is there any relationship then between their physical mental state and how they're doing in class. It just seemed to me that maybe there'd be an effect. This shows you in one day in my class how the students answered. And you can see that there is a collinearity between their physical and emotional states, that if you're feeling good emotionally and maybe you're feeling good physically or not. But there are outliers in both directions here. To what degree does that influence their outcomes in class? Questions that I have never asked before.
Do you ever show them this plot?
I do. I'm getting there. I'm getting, because here's what I found last semester was that for the physical state, there's really no relationship between what they reported physically and the grades that they're getting in class. Now, immediately, I gave this talk a month or so ago, and somebody said, wait, you're a meteorologist. Winter sucked last year. Was there any relationship with weather? And it turns out there was. I would ask you to guess what it is here, but I'll tell you. It turns out that their physical state was linearly correlated with the minimum temperature for the day. Straight line. Colder they were, miserable they were. Sure enough. But there was no relationship, at least with their grades. For the emotional state, on the other hand, there didn't seem to be any relationship unless you're in the category below half. You're sort of emotionally below average. And then, at least for a couple of the exams, there certainly seemed to be an impact on their grades, which kind of makes intuitive sense. If you're going through some emotionally challenging time, maybe you can't study as much or something. Begs the question, what do we do with it? So Mike's question, I asked the students, I showed this to the students on the last day of class last semester and said, first of all, how comfortable are you telling me about your emotional physical state every day? And the students said, whatever, we're on Facebook, you know. No problem. So, okay. Second question, what would you hope that I would do with the information about your emotional state, remembering I'm a meteorologist? And I gave them, should I tell your advisor? And they said, no, under no condition. All right, number two, about the various resources on campus you should be aware of. They said, whatever. But going further, it turned out that what they wanted was they want coffee. They answered that if I knew they're having an emotionally challenging period, they wanted to get invited out for coffee. They want to sit down with you and be able to explain to you one-on-one what's going on in their life, thinking that you're probably going to be more understanding or lenient. Isn't that cute? But that's my job. My job is to interact with the students, and so this helps me identify which students I really ought to spend some time with. So this semester, to go to your question, I'm drinking a lot of coffee. You meet with the students, you find out what's going on in their lives, you help them as much as you can, but it's giving me information, kind of what Tim is doing about how do you give feedback. Well, if you don't look at the extreme cases, you're missing the most important part. So sitting down and understanding what they're going through and how do I now tell the next student what to do, what works, what doesn't work.
Perry, I'm curious if these are students that I immediately figured that these students were translating how do I feel emotionally about my grade in this class. But if you're going out for coffee with them, I don't know, are you learning whether it's emotional things outside of the class and there's...
Yeah, I would say 80% of it is outside the class. You know, other issues, life happens, and it affects them. And yeah, I can't be lenient, but I can certainly be understanding and at least lend an ear. And that's kind of our job. So, the question is, should we measure that in every class? That's silly. Is there some way we could start measuring this to the campus body as a whole? Is there some app that Jared wants to build now that would allow you to, on a scale, just to put in that information daily? Or could we do it with Fitbits or something? Or some way to measure that?
Well, maybe you find this out when you go to coffee, but what about the students who just have a really high stress load of classes compared to the one that's taking your one class? I mean, that would affect them emotionally.
I haven't run into that per se, no, but it doesn't mean I won't. That's the job of the advisor, I'm hoping. Yes?
Have you, I know you have those markers on background and things. Have you correlated anything around like emotional well-being and socioeconomic level or anything?
I have not yet, no.
This is a stressful place.
No, there's so much research that could be done when you have this much data that I haven't done. But yeah, that's the challenge is now, how do we make the data available in a way that others might come in and look at that sort of problem? That's the more exciting thing. Tim, did you want to?
Yeah, there was a question about how many courses they're taking and the load that they have and so on. One of the things that we find in performance data is that the sense we have that taking a lot of classes is going to lead to lower performance is based on kind of a model that every student is the same. Right? It's clearly not true, and we actually see that in the data, because you don't see much correlation with load and performance. In fact, it sometimes is anti-correlated. Right? So you have to know the student to know what the advice should be. It isn't just,
Coffee.
Don't take 18 credits, that'd be a mistake. For some people, it's perfectly sliced.
Espresso. This graph surely didn't come out. Let me just switch over from this to, some of these plots did not upload well, so I want to go over to this guy. We'll just go, here we are. Oops. Here we go. Grades and GPA. Tim has shown this, others have shown this. When you take the incoming GPA of the student, it does predict to some degree what grades they're likely to get in class. And this is each of the 3 exams. And if you stare at that long enough with enough coffee, you start to see a positive relationship between the two with some obvious outliers. As an instructor, this is not particularly interesting or useful. It's depressing, in fact, because it says there's not a whole lot I can do. Their grades are going to be based on who they are instead of what I do in the class, and that's not settling. So I was interested to turn the question around and say, how is it that students with different incoming GPAs behave differently in class? Is there some information we can get there? And this shows that the fraction of questions attempted, the gray line on top here, students at lower GPAs just simply try less hard. They tried, maybe 70% of questions, where the students with high GPAs tried somewhere in maybe 85% of questions. Not a huge difference, but there's some decrease in the level of effort there by students with low GPA over the course of the semester. How many questions they get correct down here, the dark black line. No, the better students, the higher GPA students, get maybe half the questions right. My questions are hard. You get about half of them right. And the low GPAs get maybe a quarter of them right. So that kind of makes sense, I guess. But here's the stunner. The number of slides with notes attached as a function of GPA. The students with a high GPA, that would be the dashed line here, they're like 160 slides with notes attached on average. Low GPA, about 30. Factor of 5 difference in how many notes they're taking as part of class. Something is going on there where the low GPA students are not, either came to the university not knowing how to study, or somehow are not participating in the same way for reasons I don't yet understand.
Could it be because they're confused about the actual information that you're presenting, so they concentrate more on what you're saying versus writing it down?
It could be. I have no idea. That's the problem. At the moment, I just discovered this. I don't know yet why.
Isn't it just because people with high GPAs have accepted responsibility for learning, and those that haven't figured that out yet?
I love this. So any other hypotheses here? We can write the paper right now. I can't give an answer to any of these.
So I know the answer is going to be that you haven't done yet, but the content of these notes. Yes, it'd be interesting to look at sort of quality and this quantity.
Quantity and quality, yeah. So and you're
quality like it's great. I mean, what are they like? Are they full sentences and rich and thoughtful notes?
Yes, yes, yes. And if you are a student here, I would like to talk to you. Obviously, research opportunities to do this. Because we have access to notes, and you can start mining the notes, and you not only look at the number of words, but maybe you can start looking at the quality of the sentences and such. There's all sorts of opportunities here. And remember that, this is my class, but there's 2 million students using this system. We have data. So anybody who's got a PhD in mind, please come see me.
Have you made word clouds for the different?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yes, we have. And the word clouds are on a slide-by-slide basis.
Here, different from the different GPAs?
I've not looked at that. Yeah, good. Good. Any other research questions?
So I was just curious, because if it's an intro class, you're looking at the university GPA, right? Not their high school GPAs.
I'm looking at their university GPA.
Are you just finding that a lot of them this is their first term?
This was a winter semester, so I had one semester under the belt.
And probably a lot of these students are older too, right?
Yeah.
In extreme weather, I would guess. They're not all freshmen.
50% are freshmen. Yeah. Here is interesting, because my class is hybrid, that is, you can come to class or not come to class. Lo and behold, if you're a student with a high GPA, you're far more likely to actually physically come to class than if you had a low GPA, you're far more likely to watch from away. And the cutoff between the two is somewhere around 3.3 as their GPA.
Around the median GPA.
Yeah. So what to make of this, I'm not sure, but it poses the question, is there something about this hybrid course, in fact, that breeds mediocrity? Am I inviting students who are weaker to kind of take the course with limited participation? And is that maybe a bad thing? That's again, but we've got the data now, and this is also the number of times they just missed class. And you can see that's higher for the lower GPA students. The beauty of this is data. We are collecting so much data we've never had before, and it just opens the opportunities for us to think about what's going on in my class. What is it I do that's of most value, or value, to the student learning? And for me, this is just a great place, great opportunity for the future, about accessing this data and working with it. Coming back finally with, what do we do now? We as instructors, let's say that you knew everything the students are doing somehow. All this is collected into a database. How do we use that to design what we do in the classroom? One of the things we're trying in this new system of LectureTools is that you get to make the call. So, there are various, is attendance important in your mind at student learning? Is the number of times they view the lecture captures important? Is the number of times they participate they ask questions? Or how many notes they take? Or how often they participate in activities? Which of these are, activities I might think is very important here? And this bar, this circle, this pie thing over here changes size, and you can create a weight we kind of call engagement. It's that function. You create this function on the fly. You decide what you think is important, and then it tracks all your students by that measure over the course of the semester and will ring your bell when a student falls below whatever you set as a criteria. Now, it's an art form. It's not a science yet. It's simply giving a tool back to the instructor to think about what's important in my class, what things are related to grades, and how can I keep track of students, particularly early in the semester, who might need special care. But we're trying to think about building a dashboard here. This is the dashboard that comes with the new system that you decide how this works. If we also couple this with things like, like Tim's work, so that the results from this could feed into the feedback the students get. So it says, oh, I see you got these questions wrong this week in class, and given your background, I don't know, it gives them whatever feedback is appropriate. So the system we have, this LectureTools is becoming something called the active learning platform, and inside of that you got student response. You don't need clickers anymore. It just uses the devices the students already have. It's got the notes, it's got the questions the students can ask, and everything is the content management system here. So all the slides that you use, all the notes are uploaded into the system, are available to you then from any computer anywhere, so you can access them and put other lectures together. And if you lecture capturing not with the echo thing, but you've got using Blue Review or the system here in Kane, that can also feed into this thing. Here's where the cool part starts. Oh, I didn't show you this. Can I show you that? Let me try to show you this. So here, for example, is what the student gets after class. And you can see down here, after class, it's got the captured lecture, whether this is from Blue Review or from Kane or from Echo. It's here. Here are the slides you presented in class. And you can move back and forth between these by flipping the switch here. Isn't he handsome? Go up there. Next slide. And here's the cool part. The student took notes, and they took notes on slide 7 here. You click that, and it moves to that spot in the lecture capture where they took the notes. So it's now connecting not only what they're doing during class, but also the recording that happened during class. They can go back and remind themselves of what that was about at that point in the lecture. This is, yeah?
Perry, do you track notes that they take while watching the lecture capture?
Yes. Both are recorded. Yes. Both inside or outside of class. So So you can use this for the flipped class also. I can put recordings up, they can watch it, take notes if they want before class, they can take and then participate in activities during class. Yes? Yes. All right, quickly going back here. Announcement I want to make for some of you in the audience who are interested in this topic. We are trying to think about how to stimulate more growth in this area of educational technology. And so one way we're doing that is that we set up an incubator downtown Ann Arbor above Sam's Clothery. And in that space, we invite once a month people to come and discuss their ideas for educational technologies and meet with others, both from the business community and from computer science and around the world, to talk about all our interests and interact so that maybe you can meet a programmer who can help you make something happen. Maybe you've already got an idea going and you want to work with some business people to think about how to get it to a point that it's ready for funding and such, or write an SBR grant. This is sort of the opportunity if you are in that world. The next talk is next Monday, and we have Chuck Severance coming. If you don't know Dr. Chuck, this is a good time to come. We call it a Keginar. It's the best webinar ever. Adult beverages are available. It's also broadcast live on the internet, so you have to bring your own beverage. And you can participate from wherever you are. If you would like information about that, you can sign up here at bit.ly/Keginar. Just for the side, we also bought the name Weedinar. Looking.
Did you buy the name Keginar?
You did. Keginar.com.
So I'm curious how you're keeping track of what changes you're making, the metrics on your own behavior, because metrics drive behavior, so you're changing your course.
My wife sent you, didn't she?
We're having coffee after this.
My own behavior. Well, I don't know. As long as I've been here, this is such a wonderful place to be innovative that my job is simply to throw half-baked ideas on the ground, and students seem to take them and turn them into good stuff. So I'm not sure my behavior has changed a whole lot. It's trying to change
your course from one semester to the next based on how the outcomes of the...
Oh, that's not true. You're right. So, I mean, if I come up with some kind of cool new tool I can add to this thing, then I'll bake that in and try it out. My class, I make the students on day one sign a piece of paper saying, I fill in your name, have a sense of humor. Because I tell them, I'm going to do technology, we're going to push some envelopes here, and it's not going to work. Get over it. And they're okay with that. They just love to see you try. And it seems to work.
So, I mean, it seems to me one of the biggest behavior changes that's happening is you're paying attention to what's happening. Sure. When we started teaching here, we didn't pay attention to it.
Oh, we have all this research we have to do, and then teaching. How much training do we have in teaching? You can turn the TV off now. Because we aren't hired here to do teaching, we're hired here to do well in research. And teaching is added to that task with absolutely no training, generally. And so we're sent out then to do this work. Then you get tenure, and you say, well, screw it. Now I can teach. So senior faculty, I think it's their responsibility then to just get fearless and go out and try stunts in the classroom, because you're not going to lose anything, and you might learn something. And that LectureTools, the beauty of this thing for me was, because I'm a programmer, I did a sabbatical with a fellow named Carl Weinman, who he got the PhD in physics. He got the Nobel Prize in physics, and a PhD probably. Then he turned his attention to science education, and he would have this meeting once a week where he'd bring together the scientists at the University of British Columbia and me, and we'd sit and we have to read one of these articles from the education literature. And if you ever read these literature articles, they are kind of hard to read as a scientist because they use language that we're not comfortable with, just I'm sure as ours is uncomfortable to them. But we'd sit around the table and discuss what this meant and how we could apply it in our own classroom, and then I'd paddle back to my office and just started coding it. So, the opportunity to sit down together as engineers or scientists that we are and talk about what's been learned in the literature, how can we apply it to our own work, and one way to do that is, well, then try to code it. Can I take what I've just learned and build something from it that I could use in multiple classes? And in that way, you really learn a lot. There's something beautiful about going through that process of coding because it requires that you really think about what's important in teaching and how do I bring that to the students. Awkward pause. Thank you. Any other questions before we?
So what are you going to set your engagement settings to be next term based on the data you've?
Well, how am I going to set mine next term? That's an excellent question. I don't have an answer, but I'll give one anyway. It's going to be based on how many questions they're getting correct, how many questions they're answering, those two for sure, and probably something about how often they type notes. For me, that means basically pinging them. Are you participating? It would be the three things I would look at to start with. Keep it simple.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but there was a question behind you first.
I'm a technical person. I'm curious about how you get the data downloaded from Echo.
Oh, I'm part owner of Echo. Well, it's all stored in a MySQL database, and I just do queries. Queries against it. If you want to talk about it in detail, I can tell you more.
Thank you.
So you talked a lot about how to identify people at the very low end and what you might or might not be able to do about them. But if you're interested in taking the one standard deviation about the median of your class and moving that group higher, how would you use your data to improve that?
All right. Steve's question is not just looking at the shoulders of the distribution, but what about moving the whole median higher? And how would I do this? That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for it yet. Would you have a suggestion, perhaps?
Well, that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah. Well, maybe maybe it's
But
a feedback.
Maybe some of the data you've shown, especially the GPA, maybe that's a way to test different pedagogical approaches to see if you take people who came in the middle range of GPA, you could somehow make them perform higher during the term by trying something.
Yeah, and Tim and I have joked about this over beverages, that you can predict a student's grade on day one based on their GPA to some degree, right? So what they get then relative to what you estimate they'd get is sort of a measure of how much better or worse they did. So that anomaly in grade might be the thing you really want to model against.
That would be more meaningful than a test, which at least I think tests are pretty useless for figuring out if students actually learn something.
Yeah.
But this might be a better metric.
So when the students are asking you questions through your class, are the answers being captured any way other than verbally from you answering them when you see them pop up on the screen? I mean, are they being put back into the system, or are you seeing them showing back up in the notes? Like, here was the answer to the question that so-and-so or somebody asked.
That's a good question. I don't know. I could go back and sniff the notes, I suppose, looking.
But you're not typing them back into the system?
I'm not, no. I don't do anything that looks like work. The whole point here is I want to make a better environment, but I don't necessarily want to work harder. Oh, one part I didn't show and should have is, well, a question usually arises, is right now you have to take your slides and you upload them into our system, and there's some work involved in that. That was too much for me. So soon, being in a few weeks, there's something called a ribbon that's going to be coming that you just add to PowerPoint. And you just come to class, run PowerPoint, and PowerPoint uploads the slides into our system. Students get access to the slides, and they can you can create questions in PowerPoint which get uploaded to the system. You can see the results in PowerPoint. You don't have to do anything different anymore. For me, this is good because I don't have to work so hard. But that's shortly coming.
On the questions thing, you do have, the question and answer thing in addition to the notes on LectureTools, so people are typing in anonymously, this question or that. And for you at least, and what I've used it to, the TA is sitting in the classroom or somewhere, answering the questions in real time. So those are answers that are immediately put back up. I guess the question was.
Oh, that's true.
Yes. So those, but somebody types in a question that's answered.
That's right.
By you immediately after or the TA during. but it's the lecture tools, you know, like the map.
The big question.
But yeah, with that M thing, you know, that was the hottest point. Did that ever get put into the content stream so that people could say, oh, I didn't get it right, but there's the right answer, and I can go back and review that being the right answer.
In fact, I want to follow up on what Mike's saying and push back and say, you know, if I give the answer in the front of the classroom, I don't want to have to do all the students' work. They should write down the answer themselves, and if they don't, oh well.
You should make a note right there on that slide.
That's why I'm wondering if you see your answers showing up on a lot of notes. Ding, ding,
oh,
ding,
yeah.
ding, ding.
Yeah, no, I haven't looked at that, so I can't say I know that can say yet. No. Cool. And anybody who wants to try this system, the new system, is going to be available in January. We're going to have like 2 or 3 instructors on campus who might want to try it out. If you're one of those 2 or 3, please email me and let me know, because we can add lecture capture. We can make your class have all these parts. We need some volunteers with a sense of humor to take it for a test drive.
On one of the slides, it seemed like people who came to your lecture in person, it was predicting that they were going to get better grades, right? So do you encourage them to come?
I do not.
No?
I do not. I didn't show that graph here today. I didn't show that graph, but it turns out the grades, as a function of the number of times they participated from away from class for each of the 3 exams, and it turns out there is no difference in grades. So the students who participated from home did no less well than the students who physically came to class for grades in class, which tells me that it's, you know, because I'm providing an interactive environment, an active learning environment, no matter where you are, it still has value to the student. Or it could be that students who stayed home are a mix of, you know, of students. Some of them didn't need to come to class because they just already knew this stuff, and some of them were challenged. You know, there's just, again, so many ways to cut this data up that help. We're looking for help in doing that.